Hey, everybody. Paul Sterling here. I'm so glad that you joined us tonight. Tonight we are talking. Tonight's an uncomfortable conversation about uncomfortable emotions. What do we do with them? We all have them. Um, do we lean in and learn from them, meet them with compassion, or do we lean out and let them wreck our relationships? And so we've got speakers from one coast, not even to the other coast. We've got from one coast all the way to Hawaii. So I'm going to give each person a chance to introduce themselves. I'm Paul Sterling. I am the author of Argue Less, Love More, a book all about relationship communication. I've been a communication and intimacy coach for couples for over 25 years. And I picked our guests tonight because I think they're going to help us look at all the different dynamics of what do you do with uncomfortable emotions. We all have them. We rarely want to talk about them. And if we don't process them well, they could destroy our relationship. So let's see if we can bounce over to Heidi first and see. No, Heidi first. Heidi is in Hawaii, but we're having technical issues from Hawaii. So let's bounce over to Candace, who's a fellow love coach. Candace, maybe you can tell us a tiny bit about how you became a love coach and why you think this topic is important.
Yeah. So I am Candace at the Temple of Frolic. And for me, things were messy. I was not given the manual, and the subscriptions that were being put into me weren't working for me. And I definitely had no idea how to deal with my emotions. Yeah, initially I started my journey in coaching, just educating myself for myself, and then expanded from there. This conversation, this is a conversation about all the conversations that you don't want to have that you need to have. And it's important to know, how do we? What are the possibilities? There are maps and pathways, there are coaches, and you don't have to do it alone.
So Candace, can I call out a tiny bit can I say a little bit about you?
Yeah.
Candace has gone blind. And if you think about it, there are some friggin' uncomfortable emotions that come up with that. And you can become miserable, or you can lean in and try to make your life magical. And if you listen to Candace talk about like her website, the House of Frolic, or whatever it is of Frolic, it's like she has chosen a different pathway. And that's why I wanted to bring her on, because she's been through hell on many different times, and from her growing up and then challenges here in the adult life of going blind, and she's choosing to be a leader in that. So that's partly why I brought Candace on, just as a great example of possibility. And all of us here on the call, none of us are going to say we've mastered this, we've moved on, we don't have uncomfortable emotions anymore. It's not true. Part of the reason I had this call is because we teach what we need to learn. And right now in my own life, there was a bunch of uncomfortable emotions: jealousy, fear, loneliness, all this coming up for a relationship coach. And I said, wow, let's let's do a courageous love show about that. And so I'm going to do a tiny bit of an introduction. The next couple that I'm bringing on, Eli and Monica. Monica, if she stood up, you would notice she's obviously just a few months pregnant. And Eli and her are engaged, and they've gone through all sorts of wonderful and amazing and strenuous challenges. So I thought they would be a great example to come in and talk about this. So can you guys say a little bit about how you ended up on this journey?
Yeah. This journey of relating, or this
Well,
journey
of
being
learning
here.
about being well, you're not a relationship coach yet, but you're basically learning a lot about how to do that. How did you go to transforming your relationship? I guess you chose to lean in and get better, not get bitter.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Some days, most days. Some days I feel bitter. Well, yeah. So, like Paul has said, and Candace was saying, I didn't, come from a home where, communication and honesty and relating just all came easy. I came from a very, dysfunctional family, and I kind of, fumbled through young adulthood and just trying to read as much as I could about relationships, because I knew I really, really wanted to have a close and intimate and good relationship. But I knew I needed help to get there, because I knew I didn't have all the tools. And then, but then in real time with practicing with Eli, it's like, even though I had all these tools, the tools are great, but there's so much raw emotion and so much that comes up in relationships, and like, and all the stuff that we mirror for each other, and it could be so intense, especially like the more challenges you have. And we have 4 children here, and then 1 on the way, so it's like, it's a lot.
It's certainly a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. And we have an age difference. I'm 15 years older than Eli.
So this is going to be his first kid, his first child, and part of the reason I love them is because they're so authentic. They lean in, they're learning, and it's like, I wanted people on the call that are in the middle of the journey and people who are on the far end. And I'm looking to Heidi to see whether I'm getting the thumbs up or thumbs down as far as technical issues. Can we try hearing from you? And if
I can try, but I don't know how I sound.
not good. It's a problem
I'm still trying to get on the computer.
All right. Well, I'll say a tiny bit about Heidi Love. Heidi Love is one of the other relationship coaches from Love Coach Academy. She runs a program on recovery, and does a bunch of talks, and her and I have taught together. And this, if you look at her face right now, this is her sad face when she wants to take the computer and well, I'm speaking my part here. When what I would like to do is take the computer and whack the damn thing. So cool. All right, and I'd love to hear from all of you out there in Facebook land. If you could type in, where are you calling in from, and which uncomfortable emotion, and I'm going to hear from my different presenters here, which uncomfortable emotion is the one you want to avoid the most? And I am going to tell you mine, and then we'll hear from each person. One of the things from growing up the way I did, one of the things that's toughest for me is ambiguity in a relationship. Now, that doesn't sound nearly as scary and bad as a lot of other things. It is terrifying for me. And ambiguity and jealousy go closely side by side, and it's like learning how to deal with those feelings. So I'd love to hear from people on Facebook land. What are the challenging emotions that you have to deal with, the feelings that you would do almost anything to avoid? Oh, the other one, shame. I am dyslexic. I'm grammatically impaired. My spelling is very creative, and I will send out a text. I wrote a whole book. I wrote a book. I tell you, it took 6 months or more to write the book, and it took 6 years to edit the book. It's like and every time I send something out and type, it's always, I have to deal with my shame monsters. So Candace, maybe you could tell us a little bit about what are the uncomfortable ones you're wrestling with or have had to.
Oh, yeah, there's such a wide spectrum. And yeah, I say right now there's a couple big things going on, and they interestingly bump up against one another. Since going blind, I have developed what can be seen as pretty serious agoraphobia, and leaving my house and or especially getting in a car with someone scares the shit out of me. My heart, like, it's not even a thought. My body, that I stop breathing, my body just clams up.
Hmm.
Um, and so yeah, that's something I'm trying to like lean in with, like, and there's the blindness, but there's a history of trauma that plays a role in this. And I've recently had my trauma body awakened. And in essence, someone else was responsible for this, crossing my boundaries, not honoring them. And confronting them is not easy and really scary. Especially that they're a long-term friend and lover. It was very obvious they didn't know. And I had a full trauma response that would make it very confusing for someone to understand that I was not okay with what happened.
So Candace, just so I bring everybody up, maybe not everybody's had the exact experience Candace has. In fact, a lot of you haven't. But where is it in your life that you've had these trauma responses where it triggers your body, creates pain, it creates behavior? We get, like, we're communicating from one of three places. We're communicating either from our head, our heart, or our hurt. And when we're in our hurt, we're in our reptile brain, and we don't have access to all this wonderful thought process. We are just in the world of enemy, ally, danger or safety. And it's learning how to understand and be compassionate with our emotions. Otherwise, we live in a world of reactivity. So anything else you wanted to add to that, Candace, before we bounce to Eli and Monica?
No, I think the only other little thing is the freeze response, the fawn, freeze fawn, that's the particular thing that can create some real confusion and shame and misunderstanding. So yeah, that's a big thing.
So for the listeners, when we get into the reptile brain, that's the part of the brain that's reactive, and it has three main areas: fight, flight, freeze. The other term that you were using is fawn, but it's like, what are we going to do? We're going to fight with it. We're going to run from it. We're going to stand still and hope it goes away. And that's the way a lot of people deal with their relationship issues. They use the hope and pray method. It's like they hope and pray the upsets will go away, and they rarely go away until you resolve them. They get recycled again and again. They might not be as dominant in that moment. So Eli, Monica, what has been some of the uncomfortable emotions that you guys have had to wrestle with?
I know, well, you've mentioned jealousy. I've definitely felt jealousy and shame. For myself, I grew up in a very like white Christian,
Sexually repressed.
yeah, and in moving in with four other children and a very, very wild and open woman and family who are not afraid of being themselves and in their bodies, and I definitely struggle to open up in that way.
Mm-hmm.
Like that one time the kids were all dancing, and I was like, "Oh, Eli, come dance!"
Yeah, and I love dancing. I like alone. Like I've dance all the time by myself, and I absolutely love dancing, but like something about just someone being there and watching, like I felt so bad about myself that I just couldn't bring myself to dance with everyone and just have fun, just like let go. And yeah, I was just like, it hurt a lot. Yeah.
And actually, Eli, I'm glad you brought this up, because a lot of times the emotions that are uncomfortable for people are shame, jealousy, fear, all of that. The other thing, though, that is uncomfortable for people, depending on their background, is pleasure, is freedom, it's passion. In fact, I'm kind of diverting us a little bit, and we'll come right back. But the first women's evolution was about power and prosperity. So they got the right to vote, they got a lot of rights, and they got the right to own things and prosperity. But I think the second revolution is coming now, and that is the revolution of pleasure and passion, to be able to own their passion,
Yes.
And it's not just for women. And it's uncomfortable. What do we do with our discomfort? And this is something that I'd love to hear from people on the call too. And we're sharing vulnerably ourselves. We're not coming across as the ones that are all fixed, but it's like we're going to get into some strategies to dealing with your discomfort. So anything else you wanted to say, Eli?
No, we're definitely not here because we are fixed and know all the answers here.
And I just want to say, though, with what Eli was just talking about, that shame, when I wish I could say that when that would come up for him, I would be really compassionate all the time and, oh, how can I, support you? But a lot of times I just felt like he's being like a stick in the mud, and I would get really upset and like just, because it would trigger me of just like, I'm constantly trying to create this space for everyone to feel good and happy. And here he is with this sad, mopey look on his face. And I'm like, dude, come on, snap out of it. Like, because I didn't
okay, hold on, Monica. Just put a pause right there for 2 seconds. I want to bring people up. I want to come right back to where you are. So the first thing is there's 3 core areas we're working on. So number 1 is we have these uncomfortable emotions. So I'm drawing this out, Candace, so that you understand. And then those uncomfortable emotions trigger us. And then what happens is our triggers trigger our partners, and then we end up stopping communication. Because if I'm already ashamed and embarrassed, and then I see that I'm triggering my partner, does that take away the shame, or does it just drive it in deeper?
Yeah, exactly.
So we end up in this
round and round we go. Like, have fun, darn it.
Yeah, what is wrong with you, you stupid person?
Like, why are you gonna rain on our parade?
And that's, can we be the thing that Marshall Rosenberg, the creator of nonviolent communication, said is intimacy is the ability, and this is going to sound odd, so please bear with me, the ability to enjoy someone else's pain. So Monica, do you enjoy your kids' pleasure? Like if they're happy and laughing, and does it bring you joy?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And if Eli is in pain, do you enjoy his pain? Not that way. But why?
I actually, there's definitely been moments where I've been able to tap into, consciously going into a compassionate space, but I had to really like work at it, because my first instinct was like, he's a bad person, because only a bad person wouldn't be able to enjoy the beauty of this moment. And I felt triggered by him because of it. Like, I'm like, what kind of person can't just let themselves go and be in the here now? Like, what what is wrong with, like, I was judging him, and it wasn't what I wanted to do, but it was my knee-jerk reaction. I felt triggered by his response to us. Yeah, absolutely. I was like, who is, like, why can't he just enjoy this beauty? Why can't he just enjoy right now? Why does it have to be this,
So,
yeah.
So let's do this dance and let's look at it. And if we look at this is a coaching moment for everybody else to watch, and to be with it. Like, if you have been where Monica is right now, raise your hand. I'm raising my hand. I've been where the place where their discomfort is screwing up my happy face. And then the question is, can I just be with his discomfort without trying to fix him? And can I stay? So rather than, what took me a while to wrestle with Marshall's thing, intimacy is the ability to enjoy someone else's pain. I actually got it where intimacy is the ability to be with someone who's in pain without trying to fix them, fight with them, flee from them, run away. Like, let me lean in and be with you. And how do we do that? And how do we do that without trying to fix them? Because, see, the irony of it is Monica's wondering why Eli can't just be with everybody's feelings. And Eli's there going, I'm having my feelings. Why can't everybody be with my feelings? My feelings right now might be shame and embarrassment and disappointment. And I'm being self-conscious, and it's like how the level of intimacy we can feel with ourselves and with somebody else is the ability to be with that pain and discomfort. And so what I'd love to hear is, what is the way that you deal with it when you don't lean in? I'll just start and maybe we'll bounce to Candace. When I come from an alcoholic family, my dad was the main alcoholic. He drank enough for the rest of the family. We didn't even have to participate. We could get a, contact high or whatever you want to call it. But so what do you do? When my dad got uncomfortable, he drank. When I get uncomfortable right now, I binge watch Netflix, or I do some other ways, or sometimes I sit and be with my feelings and emotions and all that. And Joan is saying, I hope that Heidi can fix her technical issue. She is amazing. Yes, we all hope that Heidi can fix her technical issue. So what are some good strategies, Candace, and what are some not good strategies for dealing with uncomfortable emotions? Oh, I think we got Heidi back too.
I would say the first thing that comes up for me with like what I do that doesn't work for me is basically do nothing, just it's my brain likes to think I'm sitting with my emotions, but I'm not. Like, for me, like, so the healthy way is a conscious, intentional sitting with the emotions with some ritual or writing, and sometimes just taking a break from it. Movement, dance, movement, sound, those are big things for me. To like give it, like, you just gotta, it has to move. Emotion, energy in motion, and it's stagnant, it gets stuck, and it's up to us to give it that fluidity. The emotion isn't the problem. We all have them. What are we doing with them?
Exactly. Thank you. And let's invite Heidi and appreciate her tenacity in getting on here from Hawaii. So Heidi, just a little bit about you, and you wanted to talk about your understanding of uncomfortable emotions and what people do with them.
I have some right now. Aloha. I am tenacious. I'm one of those people, if I lose something, I will relentlessly look for it until it's found. So I had to get my computer working to be here with you guys. And I made a big effort to be here today and took 3.
Uh-oh, she froze for a second. Well, she was here for a minute. So we're going to come back to Heidi in a second. And it seems like technical issue day. So Eli and Monica, what are some healthy ways and what are some not healthy ways? Because I want people to relate to both sides of what are some healthy ways of you dealing with the emotions when they come up, and what are some of the unhealthy ways where there's ramifications. Wait, I can't hear you, Eli. You're muted.
All right, yeah.
That was brilliant, but it was muted.
Brilliant. Anyways, anything to distract myself from what I'm feeling, from numbing myself, or just like watching, stupid videos, or eating just like it's just I know I have like a bad, like a unhealthy relationship with food. Just like when it's like trying to fill some void that's not gonna be there. But then on the contrary to that, like
on the healthy
yeah, as a alternative to that, I like just getting outside and just sitting in fresh air and just like sitting there and just like letting everything just be. That definitely helps. Or going for a walk or just being in nature, I definitely find that helps a lot and be able to process all the things in depth.
Yeah, and I think when Eli does like going outside or something like that, then it gives me a chance to calm down or not calm down, but it just gives us enough space so that it doesn't keep escalating. But when he tries to distract himself, it just makes me angrier because I'm aware of what he's doing. And I'm like, no, you're like, this isn't helping us. And I confront. My strategy oftentimes is just to confront everything. Like, I'm upset about this. Let's confront. I'm uncomfortable with your discomfort. I'm going to confront you and ask you what's going on. And sometimes it's healthy, and sometimes we get somewhere, and sometimes Eli shuts down, and then I'm just like, you need to get out then and go get some fresh air or something so we can have a productive conversation.
So Monica, you were talking about Eli. So
yeah.
What about you? What do you do for yourself when you're uncomfortable with him? What works and what doesn't?
I confront him. I confront Eli.
But what do you do with the reason you're confronting Eli is you're uncomfortable and you want Eli to change so you can feel comfortable.
Yes, that's exactly it. Yes.
So, by the way, Monica, you're not the only one who does this. I'm not like, I think we all do that. So I'm just, I just am pointing it out though, that sometimes that's an ineffective strategy and it's very seductive.
Well, it depends on like where my resources are. Like today, I've been in a pretty good mood for the most part. And so, like when Eli left some dishes in the sink after I cleaned all the dishes out of the sink and he came and left dishes. Now, like if I wasn't feeling so well, then I would have been really upset, but I just kind of teased him about it. And I like felt like I could let this go. This isn't a huge deal, So a lot of times it just depends on my own, where I'm at. If I've had enough rest because I'm pregnant, I need a lot of sleep. Go ahead.
Hold on one second. This is a really important thing you're bringing up. This is a tip for everybody, and then we're going to bounce to Heidi while we have her. But if you're going to have a triggering conversation, one about money or sex or kids or habits or something, it's really important to set yourself up and to set your partner up to win. And Monica kind of brought it up with the concept of, am I resourceful today or am I reactive? If I'm reactive, and when you have 4 kids and you're pregnant, it's
most of the time I'm reactive. Yeah.
it's easy to get in overwhelm because it's a lot to handle. So it's important to set it up and go, honey, are you resourceful right now? Because I want to have a conversation about money or something, some other triggering issue. So this is one of those key things to write down, set yourself up and your partner up to win, and have difficult conversations when both of you are feeling resourceful. So let's bounce to Heidi. We'll come back to everybody as we go around here. Heidi, aloha.
Aloha. I'm sorry, I'm going in and out. I'm reading this amazing comment that talked about how they deal with, so I want to read it. It says, I get angry and lash out and say horrible, nasty things to the person because I feel like they hurt me. Then I have to apologize and remember the universe and life is the light and the good in the universe, and I don't need to add to the dark side. In other words, I don't need to take on what the person says about me. I need to hold space with myself and my higher power, whatever that is. But it's so hard to do that.
How many can relate to that one? Absolutely.
I'm just sitting here thinking, I do pretty well with uncomfortable feelings. And then I'm like one of those animals that's super calm, and you taunt me and you taunt me and you taunt me, and then once you've taunted me and I'm really, really hurt, then I am very passive aggressive. I'm thinking that lately, like the hurt comes out as little snide comments that are mean because I don't feel the safety to talk about what is true in this particular situation. So I was just telling on myself. That's what I'm thinking of talking to you guys. And then I also wanted to comment, hearing Monica, I work with so many couples, and many times one of them, the focus is more on outside themselves, whether it's kids or the partner, and it's a lot easier to describe other people or manage the comfort outside here when I like to call it the tornado, and whatever's going on around us, can we be, in the center ourselves, and are we aware of what's going on for us?
You've got a fan there, Heidi. I'm just reading the comment. Kidding. So I want to give an example of uncomfortable emotions and ways of handling it. I was living in Hawaii. This was probably about 5 or 6 years ago, and my mother had a stroke. And when they called me and told me, and she was in Arkansas, they said that there's an 80% chance that she's not going to make it. And I bought the first super expensive ticket I could get out of Hawaii to fly. And before I left, they said, it's gotten worse. So what's worse than 80% chance she's not going to make it? And so I get to Arkansas. My brother's flown in from Vermont with his wife, and we're all there. And she comes to, and I'm standing at the end of the bed, and she looks at me and goes, "You're not Michael." I'm like, wow, I kind of know that. But my own mom didn't recognize me. And it's like, boy, can you go through a ton of uncomfortable emotions with that and sadness. And then at one point, she started recovering somewhat, and my brother and his wife and I met with the neurologist, the operating doctor, and the doctor said she's not going to have a lot of executive functions. She's going to not be able to travel by herself, like all of this stuff. My mom is one independent wild child. Like if you pictured Monica 50 years from now, that would be probably my mom, wild child. And we said, the doctor walks away, and we look at each other and just say, the doctor doesn't know my mom. And what I'm saying, though, is what we ended up doing is going to sound really odd. My brother, his wife, and I went bowling. Now, I hadn't bowled in years, and I haven't bowled since. But it was a way to move the sadness, the grief. And it's like, if we don't take care of our own discomfort, it's hard for us to be there for other people. And so this is a really important thing. So like with Eli and Monica, Monica's going through the pregnancy. It's going to be more uncomfortable for Monica than Eli, but Eli needs to take care of himself so he can be there for her. And it goes around with all of us like that. So what are some healthy strategies and what are some unhealthy strategies you've seen, Heidi? And then we're going to bounce to Candace in a second. But and I know you've run a whole show on recovery, and I think that might be one of the strategies people use to deal with uncomfortable emotions.
The non-recovery part?
Yeah, the non-recovery part.
Yeah, so I think that a go-to for many people, and I like to call it soothers or avoidance strategies. And if you are an addict, that can be very dangerous. But a lot of times when we don't want to deal with uncomfortable feelings, a go-to is to self-soothe with something that seems like it's acting fast, but it may have a diminishing return. And so that could be drugs, alcohol, extensive sugar for people, nicotine, pills. I mean, like Paul said, I have a recovery talk show, so we talk a lot about recovery, but those are definitely go-tos. But it can also be avoidance mechanisms, checking out for hours on your phone when you wish you cleaned your house, and then after you get off your phone, you're mad because there's still dishes in the sink or there's things left undone. And I would say the self-soothers that are life depleting, a good way to know is when you feel good for a while you're doing it, get you out of your space, but you feel badly afterwards. That is not a life-giving soother. And so, that's the contrary. And I would say to go to not abandoning yourself. I mean, to me, those are all ways to really abandon what's really going on with you. And you're the first person to abandon yourself when you do that. And if you can be with the sadness, the fear, the uncomfortability, the anxiety, and act in a way that is life-giving rather than life-depleting, you're much better off in the long run.
Thank you. Yeah. And so I want to bounce down to Candace, because Candace, I know for you, some of the strategies you used to have, you don't have right now. You don't have as much freedom and travel and mobility. And so you're having to come up with some different strategies for soothing and being with. And by the way, I talked about the description of intimacy is the ability to enjoy someone else's pain or be with someone else's pain. It's also intimacy with ourselves. Can we be with ourselves? Can we be with our pain? How much of our own discomfort can we be with before we reach for the Netflix or the bottle or the pills or whatever it is to avoid intimacy? So Candace, I just want to hear whatever you want to say about this right now.
Yeah. I started very young with unhealthy strategies of first sexual behavior, and then I began cutting, and then I found drugs and alcohol, and I was on that mission until I was 21 years old. Yeah, when you have that kind of experience to the extreme of which that I did, when I was 21 years old, like I literally had to relearn how to do everything. Like I had not been a normal functioning human. I didn't know, my parents, everybody around me, just that was the normal. Nobody felt. So yeah, I honestly, I had a really tough time. And I'm very grateful for the recovery community, and all the tools out there. Today, like you said, I've lost, a lot of access points to the things that brought me joy in life, that I found. And I've had to really, create this inner world, as you mentioned, our inner world, of peace and joy, and finding, I have a hula hoop over there. I wear ears all the time. I have Christmas decorations everywhere. For me, being playful, I think that's one of my big tools. Finding a way to, as you mentioned, the bowling, yeah, I have definitely had many experiences with, not having tools and using unhealthy tools, and then just like having to reestablish all over again. What worked for me then doesn't work for me now. I'm blind, and I'm still figuring out how to be Candace and be blind.
Thank you. Yeah. And I'm so touched by your courage. And I think one of the important things in this is the questions we ask ourselves. What's wrong with me? What's wrong with life? All of these questions kind of take us in a downward spiral versus what do I love about my life right now? How can I have fun? And there's Candace with ears and a hula hoop in her apartment, and so it's like, damn, that's pretty amazing. And I'm going to show something for a second that we're talking about. There are 7 core skills in a relationship. And I'm not saying these are the only ones, but these are 7 that are essential, and that uncomfortable feelings come in here. So the 7 skills that people need if they want a remarkable relationship, and even if it's just a remarkable relationship with themselves, they need communication skill, need skills, conflict skills, how to heal wounds, because we all get wounded and we either get bitter or better, how to deal with trust, intimacy, dealing with differences. Almost all of those things, there is uncomfortable emotions around them, and so we start to avoid them. And I'm trying to look for a good metaphor, so I'm going to give several metaphors, and maybe Heidi, you can play with me with the metaphors for a second. But if I had a car that I could only make left-hand turns with, how much progress would I make across the country?
You wouldn't get very far. You'd be going in circles.
And see, if I only can feel good feelings, whatever we're calling, or comfortable feelings, it's like I can only go in that direction. It really limits my ability to go in a straight line, because almost anything that I'm going to try to do, if there's going to be a time where it's uncomfortable in a relationship, first week, month, maybe even first year, it's like fairy tales and, happiness. And then somebody gets pregnant and boy, does the hormone shit hit the fan. And if you can't be with the discomfort, you don't get the good things. So it's the other. So that's one metaphor. If you can't, you can only make left-hand turns. The other metaphor, and then
house. Like, I'm sorry to interrupt, but like,
no, go for it.
Yeah, it's my agoraphobia. Like, I need to get out of my house. I'm not dead. I'm blind.
Right.
want to live my damn life. Yeah.
And so there's facing that on whatever that uncomfortable feeling is that's coming up. And one of the things, the mistake people make, this is a big mistake, and I'll give the other metaphor. And then, Teresa, I see that you're asking for the 7 skills again. The big mistake is I'll do the thing when I feel comfortable with it. And I am an athlete, not a great athlete, but a pretty good athlete. I was a hot dog skier, a whitewater kayaker, currently a mountain biker. And I'm in my 60s, and I'd be kayaking with these guys in their 20s and 30s, and we'd be going over like a 24-foot dam, and they go, "Do you want a portage around it? Do you want to like walk around it?" And I'm going, "Yeah, every fiber in my body wants to walk around the damn dam." Yeah, I'm going to go over it, because the only way to go get through the fear is to go through it, like to go through it, to feel the fear, feel the discomfort, and do it anyway. And
I like those acronyms for fear: face everything and recover, or face everything and reveal. And in relationship, I mean, we want to fuck everything and run. That's the acronym for fear. But when we can face everything and reveal ourselves to another human being in vulnerability, a lot can happen.
see that, Heidi, thank you so much. That's part of the reason I love doing these calls with Heidi. It's like courageous vulnerability is one of the terms I came up with years ago. And it's leaning in. How much can you reveal about yourself? How vulnerable can you be? And how much can you be with your partner when they're being vulnerable? So the other thing is, if you're going to build a tall building or something big, like a big relationship, powerful, it needs a strong foundation. And if you can't be with uncomfortable feelings, you have no foundation. It will crumble the first time there's an upset, a misunderstanding, all the rest of that. So one of the key tools to learn is, how do you deal with your upsets? So Heidi, anything else you want to say with that? And then we're going to bounce to Eli and Monica for a minute.
No, let's go to Eli and Monica.
So what I want to do is ask, and since I know you two, I know that you're Eli, show me your muscle there, dude. Oh yeah, damn! I'm having muscle envy, but I'm kidding about that. One of the things that they're doing is they're building their relationship muscles. The same way you go to the gym and you do push-ups, it's doing relationship push-ups and learning how to be with emotions that you used to run from. So what's sort of happening with the two of you? What's the evolution? I'm setting you up here, so make me proud.
Yeah, so I had no idea what it meant to be vulnerable. Like, no one ever taught me that skill. No one ever. I never knew what it meant to really share. I never grew up having really close friends, and I never had very good like communication skills with Monica. And
We used to lie to people a lot, like just
all
to
the
tell them
time,
what they wanted to hear.
everybody, and just to fit in, just to relate or try to seem in some kind of in group. And yeah, so coming to a relationship in that way reveals a lot of weakness in me, in our ability to be intimate with each other.
Yeah, it was a struggle. Like all of that, like you were talking about how there's this fairy tale period, but I feel like we've been in the trenches since the very beginning. Like, because at first Eli presented this whole lovely image. He was like this Prince Charming. And then I quickly tore that away. Like, I just tore the whole thing apart. And I was like, yeah, you're an asshole. Like, you're not shit. Like, and then we've spent all this time now getting to know each other at this very bottom line. Like, there's no bullshit between us at all. Like, none. Like, I have told Eli, I have dared myself to tell him the most uncomfortable possible things about myself, all of the things I felt the most ashamed about, or, you know, less than about. And I've drawn those things out with Eli because I wanted to know the real Eli. I want to know the real Eli, and I want us to grow together for real and not be just full of shit all the time.
And we would have these cycles of you coming to me about these things, and I would get defensive, and you would get louder and more curious and more like,
what are you hiding?
And it would make me more even unable to communicate, and we just these terrible cycle where we get into, and then it eventually have to blow up and fix somehow.
Well, eventually you couldn't drive anymore because your car, the police told you couldn't drive your car anymore, and so then you couldn't, like, it took you longer to try to like run away from me because you couldn't just drive away. You have to be on foot now.
So you two.
I'm just laughing because I've been on the other end and heard some of the stories. And it's just,
I love you, girl.
So what I want people to look at, like, how the scariest thing is to look at the mirror. What's my part in this? What am I doing in this relationship? And how am I using the other person to avoid my feelings, my uncomfort, and, you know, all of that? It's really interesting and it's challenging, and it often looks like it's the other person. And it's, who do I choose to be in a relationship with, and how much of the truth am I willing to hear? And so, Candace, do you want to add anything from your world? Then we'll hear from Heidi, and then we're almost wrapping it up. And what I want to hear from everybody in Facebook land out there is, what have you gotten from this? And before we even go to Heidi or Candace, I'm going to show, someone had asked for the 7 skills again, so I'm just going to flash those. You can, these are not supposed to be the only ones, but these are the major ones. If you nail these, you can create a remarkable relationship. So number 1, communication, where you get responsive versus reactive. Needs, where your needs become precious versus being a burden, because the only reason to be in a relationship is to get your needs met. And the whole thing on vulnerability here is, it's terrifying to reveal what we need. It's a little scary. Dealing with conflicts, do issues get recycled or do issues get resolved? And that's something when we're combative, when we confront somebody, a lot of times what they'll do is they'll go further away rather than lean in and look at it. Healing wounds and taming triggers. We all get wounded. Everybody on this call, if you're over 3 years old, you've been wounded. If you're over 10 years old, you've had your heart broken. So what do we do with our wounds? We either get bitter or we get better. And what happens is, if we can lean in, if we can stay with the conflicts, if we can resolve them and meet the conflict with compassion, we start to build trust. So in relationship, trust is either broken or it's built. Intimacy is uncomfortable for some people. And when it's uncomfortable, can you talk about sex, sexuality, all the rest of that? Actually, you know, one of the first things Monica and Eli talked about was their whole different upbringing around that area. And whether it was embarrassing and scary, or whether it was embraced and brought you closer. Dealing with differences, did that drive you apart or bring you together? So hopefully you've seen everything there. I'm going to go around and hear from each person and kind of wrap it up. And I'd love to hear from people who've been watching this call. What's the thing that you've gotten for yourself about dealing with the uncomfortable emotions? Because it is really, at this point, it's sort of decision time. Do you get some help and learn how to deal with your emotions, or do you put them in the closet and try to do it by yourself? And do you want to turn decades into days? Well, don't cut a trail. follow a path, get somebody to help you work through that. So let's hear from everybody one last round, and let's go with Candace first. What's your last closing statement here?
I just want to share at the beginning, I shared about my boundaries being seriously crossed and confronting someone. And, we're talking about mapping, how do we do this? How do we navigate these challenging conversations? And, I waited, taking space and time, let the fire cool down. And I talked to Paul. I reached out to another love coach. I set up a container. I did my damnedest to try to set up a safe container. I think that's the best thing. I feel like really taking that time when you think about how can we create a space for this most challenging thing to be seen, heard, and blossom and bloom into something beautiful. And I think the other thing I want to share is somebody pointed out recently, this idea of wounds versus scars. And then I'm thinking about scabs. Like a wound is this fresh thing. It's new, which is something I'm dealing with. A scar, oh, I have many. They've healed over. I've done some work on them. And when I talked about when I was 21 and just got off a lifetime of not healing, it was what my sponsor in the 12-step program told me at the time. It was like I ripped the scab off a wound, and it was just wide open. So I think that's kind of I really I've been thinking about that a lot as I'm looking at a lot of my challenges right now, and where am I healing? What wounds need tending? Where are my scars, and where are my wounds?
Thank you so much, Candace. Thank you for your courage and your commitment to sharing and being brave and making a difference for others. So Eli and Monica, your closing thoughts on this journey. And I think what I'd like to ask is if you could speak to the people on the call that can relate to you, but haven't reached out and gotten help, or haven't, really started, they're still in the avoidance, the hope and pray phase. When during this whole COVID thing, I had a cavity and I was in the hope and pray method, that somehow the cavity would miraculously heal itself without having to go to the dentist. Didn't go well. So it's your turn.
Yeah, the people you have in your life are vitally create who you become, and how they influence you. Like kind of what Kench was saying is having this container, building an ecosystem that creates the kind of person you want to become, and having people like you, Paul, and people on your shows, that just having that, it changes who you identify with as yourself. As someone who wants to grow, who is doing something to grow, to be better, to be, especially in relationships or whatever you do. Because I know, when I was working in a restaurant, the only people I interacted with was those 4 people at work, and they were always the
drunkards,
drunk and high, and and I became I talked like these people. I was them. Right. And then when I moved environments, you could become someone different. So it's important to the people you choose in your life.
And they can also help make or break your relationship because of that too, because they're either supporting it or they're sucking energy away from it, I think, right?
Yeah, and be very careful. This is a recommendation I want to hear from you in a second, Monica, but be careful who you get advice from. It's like if you've got cancer, don't go ask a plumber about what you should do with cancer unless they've been trained in that department. And most people are in reaction around relationships. They're not really trained in what to do around relationships. So a lot of times they think they're helping you, and they tend to make it worse. So Monica, what's your closing thoughts on this?
I think it's really important to weather the storm. If you have somebody in your life that accepts you and loves you, and you know, and you find yourself seeing a future with this person and like wanting to be with them, even if, you know, it gets really hard and you wonder if they're the right person or you're having trust issues with them, that you just kind of like, I just letting go of that whole disposable mentality, that whole Tinder swipe left or right mentality, and really sticking with that person for a while and just trying to work through what's coming up. Because what's going to happen is, even if you move on to a different person, all these issues are still going to come up. It's not like there's this magical person out there that you're not going to have any discomfort and any issues. So I think that sometimes you have to just love who you're with and weather the storm, and you know, allow everything to happen, allow the rage, allow the sadness, allow the, oh shit, what have I done? You know, like all of it, all these feelings, you allow it to happen. And then eventually you will come closer together if neither of you guys give up, and you get the tools, you find the people in your life to support you, you get the information, you keep working on yourselves. It will get better.
Yeah, getting the tools.
Yeah.
And working on the issue.
Yeah, get the
like
tools.
my cavity doesn't go away by itself.
Don't do anything. Yeah, get the tools. Definitely the tools.
Thank you both so much for being here. And so Heidi, I know you're over in Hawaii. What's your closing thoughts? And then how do people, if they want to work with you, how do people get a hold of you?
So I'm reading a comment. I got to stop shutting down. I think we both do. So I got to work on leaning in more. Yeah, I think that shutting down comes largely from wounds and triggers, and it's a survival skill that doesn't serve intimacy. So it's a good thing to cultivate. How do we show up? But I think, you know, I'm playing through my head how to deal with uncomfortable feelings. And it really comes down to, when I'm helping other people and when I've really looked at this work myself, is the first thing is not abandoning me. And so I want to encourage you to pause long enough to, one, know how you feel. What are you feeling? And what are you needing? And what are the fears around communicating it? And get really present with your own self, and try to pause there long enough to not reach for a soother immediately, to really look at, what would I need that would be life-giving? And then the next step would be, how would I communicate this? And I recommend communicating it with some skill and not when you're triggered. So those are my closing thoughts. And if you want help on how to communicate when you're triggered or when you're not triggered, I love working with families, with couples, with individuals that want to deepen their relationship skills. And you can get a hold of me at Heidi Lev. My name is spelled right there. It's www.heidilev.com, and my phone number is on that website. You can fill out a schedule with me. I do 20-minute discovery sessions that are complimentary, so we can discover where you're at and discover if we're fit. So feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to hear from you.
Thank you so much, Heidi. This is my closing thoughts on this. And almost everybody today who's on Facebook, anywhere, you've looked in a mirror. Why do you look in a mirror? Because without a mirror, you can't see yourself. And so the power of having a coach, and even us coaches have coaches. Us coaches have mirrors, and us coaches have coaches. So it's important to have a coach. I wrote a book, and I am not like the author. It was an act of love, and it became #1 in Amazon in 5 different areas: counseling, therapy, marriage, healthy relationships, dysfunctional relationships. My video on YouTube has been seen at this point over 6 million times. There are a lot of things in my life that I suck at. You would not want me to change. Well, I could change a tire, but you wouldn't want me working on your engine, tuning up your car, changing your oil, doing a lot of those things. because it's not where I've focused my time and energy. There's one thing I've focused the last 25 years on, which is transforming relationships. If you want that, if you want to go from where you are to having a remarkable relationship, there are several things you can do. One of them is, well, one of them that's not a waste of time, but pretty close, is whoops, something just clicked in there. Anyway, you're not here for more information. You're here for transformation. Information rarely helps the relationship. Transformation does. So you can join the Facebook group, which is facebook.com/groups, Remarkable Relationship. You can spend about 30 minutes with me and you start at arguelesslovemore.net/survey. And you take a survey, and then we'll set up a time to talk. And if you want, you can get a free copy of my book, Argue Less, Love More, by going to arguelesslovemore.net/free book. My closing thought is simple. If you want a remarkable relationship, you need remarkable relationship skills. If you want remarkable relationship skills, you need to go to the gym, work out, get a mentor, get a coach, get a therapist, get somebody to help you create breakthroughs in these areas. Thank you so much. Thank you, Candace. Thank you, Monica, Eli. Thank you, Heidi. And most of all, thank you all for joining us. We love your comments. And if there's somebody you think would get something out of this, please tag them. Thank you so much. And this is just the beginning of this. This is one of the most critical conversations. We'll probably be talking about this again some other time in the future. So have a good night, everybody.